Dragon is a swear word, referring to the male organ. It often comes up in Maqiao insults. You dead dragon you. Look at that stupid dragon. Watch where you put your great big dragon feet. Although Wanyu was no saint when it came to bad language, he couldn't bear other people calling him dragon. Once thus insulted, he would grab the nearest likely weapon, stone, rake, whatever, and challenge his adversary to duel it out. I don't know why this was. The last time I saw Wanyu was when I returned to Maqiao from the county seat and brought him the soap and women's socks he had asked me to buy for him. I spotted his son in front of his hut. He spat at me, guarding the door vigilantly. I said I'd come to see his dad. Wanyu, lying on the bed inside, must have heard this. But he waited until I had reached the bed before suddenly pulling up the tattered, soya black mosquito net. A face popped out.
What are you looking at? Hey, here I am, like it or love it.
There was nothing comic about this. His face was waxy yellow, thin, and angular as a bunch of dead twigs. I had to hide my shock.
I really miss you. I've been pining for days.
There was, once again, nothing comic about this. After having asked about his illness, I said it was a pity he hadn't come to the city to sing. He waved his hands feelingly.
Oh yes, very nice, very nice. Farming songs. That old piss bucket, swing it here, swing it there stuff. You really call that singing?
He sighed, and said the best times were past, from the first month to the 8th day of the 3rd, when no one did any work, when all they did was enjoy themselves singing songs. This village would go perform in that village, this mountain in that mountain. Now that was fun. The kids would sing hallway songs, seated opposite each other to sing. Once they completed a verse, they would shift their stool forward an inch, until the two stools were level with each other and the two singers snuggled up to each other, cheeks grazing, singing into each other's ear, their voices as quiet as the buzz of a mosquito, so that only their singing partner could hear clearly. This was called ear-side singing. Wanyu's eyes shone with animation.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. Those girls, they were like the bird. Squeeze them, and the water would come out.
Since I happened to be feeling aimless myself that day, I felt a stirring of curiosity about low songs and begged him to sing me a bit of one. He came over all bashful for a time, and put up a show of refusing before he agreed.
You want me to get into trouble then?
I bought you soap and socks. Don't I deserve any thanks? His energy dramatically returned, and he jumped out of bed, pacing round the room once, then twice before he considered his throat properly moistened and his concentration properly focused. Suddenly, he burned with strength, vigor, power. His sickly color swept away, two beams of electric light shining from his eyes. After he'd sung a few lines, but before I managed to understand them, he started waving his hands and coughing violently. Unable to get any words out, he slowly groped his way back to the edge of the bed.
I'm afraid my singing days are over.
He grasped my hand tightly between his icy palms. Not at all. You sing really well.
Really?
Of course, of course.
Stop putting me on.
I'm not putting you on.
Do you reckon I can still sing?
Of course, of course.
What do you know about it?
I took a drink of my water. His eyes dulled and he heaved a long sigh, leaning his head back onto the bed.
My singing days are over, all over. It's all coming mad, asphalt.
He began muttering darkly once more about commune het ha. I didn't quite know what to say, but just drank my bowl of water good and slowly. One day, a few months later, an ominous explosion of firecrackers was heard far off in the distance. When I went out to inquire, I discovered that Wanyu had died. I heard that when he died there was no one at his bedside, and his corpse lay there for a day or more before it was discovered by his neighbor Zhao Qing. I also heard that when he passed away, he had no more than 3 broad beans to his name, certainly not enough to eat for the next day. He left a child of about 10, whom some time ago he'd sent off to an uncle who lived far away. I'd seen the bare interior of his house, covered in spiders' webs and duck droppings. There wasn't even a cupboard inside this empty shell. Clothes were always heaped on a tattered hanging basket over which his neighbor's chickens would jump back and forth. People said that he'd suffered all his life at the hands of women otherwise. Surely, his wife wouldn't have divorced him and would have made certain he had hot meals to eat. He didn't even have a coffin for the funeral, and in the end Benby donated a basket of grain which, supplemented by another basket from the team leader, could be exchanged for 2 lengths of fir wood to make a coffin. In accordance with local custom, people placed a small bag of rice in his coffin as a pillow and put a copper coin in his mouth. While they were changing his clothes, Zhao Qing suddenly discovered,
Hey, he's got no dragon.
everyone was dumbfounded.
Really?
Really? He's got no dragon.
One after another they went up to the corpse to have a look. One after another discovered this male really had no dragon, no male organ, and one after another came away dumbfounded. By evening, the news had spread through the whole village, and left the women whispering among themselves in shock and disbelief. Only Uncle Luo was a little disdainful of all the gossip, pronouncing in highly considered tones that there was no need for conjecture. His appearance made everything clear. If he wasn't a eunuch, how come he didn't have a beard or eyebrows? He also said that a long time back he'd heard people say 10 or so years ago Wanyu had been arrested immediately upon assaulting the wife of a local grandee. This landlord controlled Chang'an, and headed up the defense grouping of the puppet regime. No matter how much Wanyu begged for mercy, they still cut off his dragon with one stroke of the knife. When people heard this, there were sighs all around. They thought back to the way that Wanyu endlessly curried favor with women, helping them with their work, taking their punches for them. Why had he bothered? He'd suffered decades of thunder, with never a drop of rain, fed decades of pigs, without getting a single meatball. Was he mad? It turned out even his only child wasn't his own flesh and blood. When people came to think about it, the child didn't look anything like Wanyu. With Wanyu gone, the village was much quieter, with far fewer songs. Sometimes you seemed to hear a faint screeching, but when you listened carefully it turned out to be the wind, not Wanyu. Wanyu was buried under Tianzu Peak. When subsequently I went into the mountains to cut wood, several times I walked over his body. At the grave sweeping festival, I took a look at his grave. It was the most colorful grave. All the straggling grasses had been pulled off the mound, and there were masses of paper ashes, burned candles, and incense sticks. There was also bowl after bowl of rice, laid there as a sacrifice. I also saw women there, both familiar and unfamiliar faces, some from the village and some from far away, all come to weep and wail, eyes red from grief. There was nothing furtive about their weeping, nothing timid. A fat woman from Jiangjia district even plumped herself on the ground, slapping her enormous legs, howling that Wanyu was her liver, her lungs, wailing that her liver and lungs had lived a life of poverty with only 3 broad beans left when he died. It was no less than a spontaneous convention of the feminine world. I was surprised their husbands didn't have anything to say about this outpouring of tears. Fuja said that they wouldn't say anything because they all owed Miller 1 money for work done. I think there was perhaps another reason. They felt that Wanyu wasn't a real man, and couldn't have had any untoward relations with their women. It wasn't worth putting up a fight. There was no need to settle scores. Cool story, bro.